Yeah, okay, everybody, make yourself comfortable. Try and sit a little bit forwards in your chair for a few moments. Always remember that you're not stuck in any one particular position. If you need to move, then move, it's fine. But the postures that we're aspiring to can be quite difficult, both seated and standing, because there's very subtle adjustments that take place, and we're just using the body differently. So, for instance, when you're sitting like this, you're using your back differently, and after a while, the muscles will get fatigued, and you'll need to rest. But try and get a sense for what we're looking for, which is this support from legs and back for the front of the body, finding a position where you feel that the weight of your upper body has somewhere to go within this square formed by your feet and your hips. And then excuse me, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. And your head and neck. Shoulder, arm, one side. And on the other side. Part of your chest. Belly. And back. So one of the Tai Chi classics has a line that very simply says, first in the mind. There's various ways you can think about that, but in the first instance, and as the prelude to everything else, it's really just bringing your attention in. And so we can use anything really to gather our attention, to anchor our thoughts. Your breathing, general posture, feeling of your weight in your body. You can do a gentle body scan, feet, legs to back, and so on and so forth. As that first sort of drawing in, first focusing of your attention. And once that's begun to happen, from a purely as a kind of like calming meditation point of view, you don't really need to do more than that. But for Tai Chi, there are specific things that we want to try and focus our attention on. And in this posture, particularly, what we want to try and do is to really get this experience of our weight allowed to drop. There are many reasons why we might resist that. Really, analysis doesn't particularly help because the response is always going to be the same. To identify areas where we can feel the resistance, we can feel the tightness, and then look for that feeling of releasing in one way or another. Maybe by adjusting posture, you might find a slightly different position that helps, but also this change that we feed into our tent from a very tightly clenched part of the body to a more open but still shaped part of the body. In terms of the posture that we're in, we're in a shape already. We don't actually need to hold that shape, so we can focus on that releasing element, just using our intent, feeding our imagination through our intent. And for instance, if you think about the part of your back that's leaning against the back of the chair, if you just very gently, and again, like with the clenched fist, tighten up and then release, you'll get a characteristic feeling, and it's kind of dropping down. And once we start to experience that somewhere in the body, we then have a concept that we can move to other parts of the body. So coming to the upright position again, finding a place in the chair which is perhaps a bit more sustainable than the one we had before. I mean, if you can be forwards, as I am at this point, then fine. But you know, when you need to move back to get the support for your lower back, then obviously that's a good thing to do. And then if you think about lower back, hips, buttocks, that same sense, very gently, we're kind of tensing and then releasing, tensing and then releasing. Now, as you do this, look for the feeling above that area, belly, back, ribs, and you may start to feel this sense of dropping. You may also get that sense of dropping in your hips as well, as though your hips are trying to drop through the chair, which of course they can't. So the interesting thing is that this exercise shows us what the feeling we're looking for is, even when our hips can't drop more. And this becomes important when we come to the standing exercises as well, because we don't want to tie the rooting down, the dropping of our center of gravity, the softening of our hips with bending the knees. The knees will be bent a little bit, but that is variable, and you don't necessarily want it to be a great deal. It depends on the exercise you're doing and how your knees are doing. But we do and can get that sense of dropping through the body, shall we say. And that's the useful thing to remember. Now, starting to turn your head, and what you may well do as you go through these opening exercises is notice a tightening somewhere, a gripping feeling, a block you could refer to it as, a barrier to the movement. And as you approach that barrier, it's important to realize what we're not trying to do is to punch through it. We're not trying to push our way through it. But what we might be able to do is, again, that feeling of releasing, of softening. And we can use the memory of that, the image of that to help us. And that can begin to just gradually open up the range of movement that we're getting. It will also help to clear blockages within that range of movement. And what you may notice, change to your shoulders now, hands in front of your shoulders. What you may notice, say, as you go around here, is a point where it's a bit tight, or maybe a little bit of pain, or something like that. And just let your body find a way around that. So, you know, we've got two approaches. We can go, oh, it's tight there, can I release? Or we can just say, it's tight there, can I find a way to keep the movement going, flowing around like water flowing around a rock in a river. And these are good exercises to try that out with going forwards now, because they're very simple. We're not having to think of sort of like, where does the hand go or anything like that. They're very straightforward. So there's an overall feeling as we go through these different joint rotations. You know, it affects the whole body, not just the joint. Bring your hands down to your sides. As we go through the body, we're sort of cleaning out, tidying up that inner landscape of the body, just gradually removing, dissolving obstructions and blockages to the movement. We're starting very simply as always, but there's a great deal that we can work with when we do these simple movements. You notice I just moved a little bit then. Suddenly realized position wasn't great. I'm not stuck in that position. And those sort of realizations sometimes take a little while to sink in. And then finding your arm going. So having moved, I've realized that my feet aren't in a great position. So I just shuffle them around a little bit until it feels right. and so on and so forth. Going back the other way. And then this. And rocking forwards on those bones at the base of the pelvis. And again, just thinking about or being aware of following the flow of the movement, which will indicate to you where there might be this blockage, or what it might do with this particular exercise. Of course, if for instance I'm doing this, I'm going a long way forwards, then I get a tightening in my back. If I go a long way back, I'm suddenly straining here. So it could be as simple as just slightly modifying, moderating how far I'm moving, reminding myself of the range of movement that I have, whilst I'm able to maintain this flow and this sense of space within the body through which the movement flows. Turn a little. As we, of course, we become more familiar with these exercises, the things I'm talking about become a little bit more accessible to us, I suppose you would say. And then turn the other way. So we're not trying to produce the flow, we're trying to find those things that are actually stopping the flow. And this idea of the flowing movement, I think, is very useful from that point of view, because where it isn't flowing, then for one reason or another, there's that sense of the block. And then going around, and of course, different movements will throw up different patterns. Maybe just highlight particular areas of the body. Back the other way. And back to the center, and then pushing one foot out. Back, a comfortable length of step. One way you feel that you could just gently press the foot in to the floor. Then on the other side. And hands down by your sides. So bird folds its wings, tilting forwards and rotating your arms at the same time. Arms hanging directly down from your shoulders. So with this one, we're not attempting to move the hand forwards and backwards, more or less straight down from the shoulder. And the combination of your weight transfer, the rotation in the shoulder, means that your arms end up sort of describing this nice smooth curving shape. It's that an indication of it in a way, how little we need to do with our arms to get the experience of quite a lot of movement in the arms. And that's why I do this one first, because it's a useful idea, a useful feeling to actually begin the session with, because we're going to build on that. So from this one now, going to the forward position, what you do is as you go back, you leave your hand behind a little bit and it follows on. If you imagine doing this in water, for instance, that can give you a good feeling. If you've ever tried to, I always think of pulling a boat in from the river. If you've ever done that, what happens is you pull on the rope stretches out, and for a moment nothing happens, and then the boat comes. There's a slight sort of delay. Sometimes you can get the same sort of feeling if you're trying to push or pull something like a car or maybe a wardrobe or something like that at home. You kind of make the effort, and then there's a slight delay until the movement begins to take place. And it's the same between shoulders and arms. The arms go back and then down. But you may also find, as you get more experience in this, that actually, and I'm going to really exaggerate this. It shouldn't be very like this at all. But you see, there's a slight curve in my arm. Now, as I go back, if that were to straighten, there'd now be a stretch through there, and then it would come through. Same thing here, there, and then it would come through. You shouldn't be locking your elbow out in that way. I mean, you can try it a couple of times to give you that feeling. It's much more smooth and much more connected than that as we go through. So the fisherman cast the net. Again, a good exercise at the beginning of the session, because this progression of the movement from hips, and the movement of your weight up your back to your shoulders and then down to your elbows and your wrists and your fingers is a constant in Tai Chi. Sometimes we're pulling, sometimes we're pushing on the arms, but always following that basic pattern. And then rolling the ball. Maybe thinking about the feeling you'd have if your arms were draped over a ball and you started to pull on it. The palms of your hands slightly sticking to the ball, for instance. Maybe even as you come up, a slight pressure down through the palms of your hands. And then pigeon spreads its wings. Try not to hold your fingers tight. There's a slight curve for all of the fingers. And then pushing wave, pulling, and then pushing. pulling and pushing, not totally straight in the arm. It's your shoulders doing the pulling and pushing, if you like to think of it like that. But gradually your hand gets pushed away from the shoulder. So the angle of your elbow opens out a little bit. And as that happens, there's a natural curve upwards. Because there's now movement going through the arm. It's attached at one end, but not at the other. And then punch with both fists. Here the arms do go a little bit straighter. And push your hands forward, so there's not the curve up here. Which means effectively, so if I did nothing with my hand, then as it moved away, it would curve up. In the same way as it does with pushing wave. So what I want to do is, as it goes forwards, I have a very slight, subtle pressure downwards to counteract that. I'm not actually punching downwards. I'm trying to keep my hands level. And one way you can just sort of play with this, if I rest my forearm against my leg, then if I keep doing this, then eventually you can see my fist is now coming up. So what I want is the forearm to rest as much on the leg. I don't want that to happen. And then after a little while, just take your arm off. These are all to do with intent. They're not, but they are physical movements, obviously. But rather than thinking, oh, I need to straighten my elbow or bend my elbow or whatever, just try and keep it clear in your awareness what you're doing with this exercise. And try not to make assumptions. So check what you're doing. The worst that happens when you do that is that you kind of reconnect with your body. And then opening your fingers, winding out. This is almost the opposite, in a way, of bird folds its wings. You come forwards, turn out, drop the hands down slightly as you turn them out. And then when you come back, the arms will move a little bit more because your arm is further out. But you see, if I did nothing with my hand, it would come to here. And actually what I want to do is for it to come to here. So the independent movement on the part of my arm is actually quite small. Always remember when I turn to the side, I can't really use my other arm to the back of the chair, so I can only demonstrate. So we get this very nice here, open feeling across the chest. Because the arms can stay nice and soft. They haven't got to do as much as we might think they have to do. And your hands palm down, polishing the table. Again, most of the movement forwards is your weight moving. Your arms open out a little bit. Again, you can see the angle of my elbow there compared to there. And again, there opens out. What it's not going to do is this. Doesn't go completely straight. So the more we can practice this with these simpler exercises, the more we'll get the correct feel in the movement through our whole body, in particular in our arms and our hands. And that will be useful with some of the more complex exercises. Now, turning your hands palm up, gentle push down through your hips and your feet, expanding in the center of your body and then contracting. One more time. Change into the wild goose. My fingers disappearing. A bit better. And then parting the clouds. One more time. Dragon plucks the stars from the center. Remember, part of the intent is for your hand to find that position that allows your weight of your arm flow down through your shoulder and your side and your hip to the chair and the floor. It's a position that at times I've had you hold in the position, but it's really a kind of intuitive thing that we start to build. It's partly because I think it can be variable, exactly where the right place for your hand to arrive at is can have many different factors in. You know, if you manage to, if your shoulder's a bit tight today, it would be different to what it was like last time you did this. So on. And over a period of time, you would also expect it to change because our bodies will change. Now going into pushing in two directions, bring your hands around, push up and just rest there for a moment. Nice long feeling in the back from the side. You can see my hands are somewhat forward anywhere between there and there. I find if I go back there, I can feel my shoulders tightening. There is too far forwards. It's fundamentally up. And then you bring your hands down, and this time push out. Now, this is quite tricky. What you want to try and feel is that the weight of your arms is hanging from your shoulders, much as if your hands were here. But of course, with them out like that's quite difficult. Now, if I do this, you can perhaps see my shoulders going up. Now I'm having to strain in the top of my shoulders, my arms to keep my hands there. But with that dropping down there, not going out quite so far, and that slight curve in the arms, it's still quite strong, but it's much more comfortable. So then coming in and pushing up. I often feel that in theory, if not in practice, one of the qualities of all of the movements is that if we were to stop at any point, it would remain comfortable. Aside from the thing that starts to make it uncomfortable is that we are still using the body. We're still using muscle, tendon, ligament, but we're using them differently. So it's quite possible that, say, the muscles will begin to ache after a while because they're simply not used to maintaining that shape. So it's still a strong movement, just not necessarily in the way that we might have thought of it before. And then scooping the sea, looking at the sky. And then grasping the tiger's ears. Sides. Then changing. One more time. So, part the wild horse's mane. Weight back in your right hip. Slightly turn into the right. Hold the ball, push forwards, top hand goes straight down, the bottom hand swings out. Remember that quality of movement that you're looking for in the arm. Coming back, hold the ball, move across to the left. So are you able to keep that same process? Shoulders moving your arms, hips moving your shoulders, weight moving your hips, turning in the center, and so on and so forth. Keep that same quality of movement. But it's quite difficult because it's a fairly complex exercise. So it's quite challenging to do that, which is one of the things that makes it such an interesting exercise, of course, because these are very practical arts. What we want to be able to do is to take these ideas into our lives, into the way that we normally move in our daily lives with all the different tasks that we have to do. And in those circumstances, you're not thinking, oh, I need to do this with my hip or something like that. You're thinking, I need to put the kettle on or do the washing up or push the vacuum cleaner around. I mean, you're thinking about the task in hand. Walking down the road or something like that. So if we focus on these things that I was mentioning earlier, then they become not quite automatic. We're still aware of them. They're not hidden completely, but we don't have to think about them quite so strongly because they've become part of the habitual way that we move. So one more to each side. Once again, rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Shoulder and your arm. And the other side. Upper part of the chest. Your belly. Under your legs. And your heels up. And push up and circle your knees around. Back the other way. Stand. So, once again, thinking back to that feeling of releasing that we had in the chair, releasing lower back, hips, and buttocks. You might want to just hold on to something because the suddenness of it may may actually mean that you're slightly out of line. But just bring the weight forwards a little bit, just tighten up gently and then release. Tighten and release. Now, if you've got the alignment of your body correct, that releasing take you straight down into your feet, just behind the ball of each foot. But if your weight's back in your heels, for instance, and you release, that will happen. So we can begin to appreciate that there is this very strong connection between the ability to get that sense of release and that aspect of posture that is to do with alignment. Really, rooting down and alignment are two parts of the same process. If we haven't got the body aligned, it's very difficult to root down. But rooting down helps with the alignment. So once we've got that, then we can go down a bit further. And of course, you know, our knees will bend more. But again, don't make it a direct link between your ability to root down and bending your knees more. There's a limit to how your knees will bend, but even when I go down here, I can still look for a feeling of stronger release. Now that may take my hips down further physically, but maybe not. And I think that's important. We want to get away. Obviously, we are bending the knees, and it's good to go down deeper for various reasons. You do get a deeper sense of rooting down. You also get a stronger conditioning in your legs. So what might happen, for instance, if carry on doing what you're doing, but if I were pushing the wardrobe or pulling the boat in, I might get to here, and then my hands are on the wardrobe, and then I can go down a little bit more, or I'm going to pull on the boat, and I'm here, and I drop down a little bit more, both for the extra heft it gives me, but also because it's just safer. What I don't want to do is to pull the boat like that, and when the boat starts moving, I fall over, or the wardrobe suddenly runs away. I want the root to be that much stronger. But those are, I won't say exceptional, those are extra aspects. Now bring your hands around in front of you. Arms following the movement. Again, just recall that flow of movement, that quality, tone of your arms. And do you still have that? Change to the wild goose. More time. And part in the clouds. One more time. And just shake out. So in many ways, I think in Tai Chi, there's an idea that everything is preluded by that dropping down to the ground. So come 1 foot forwards and begin to transfer your weight. I've mentioned before about this idea of just punctuating, settling, giving yourself a chance to settle. So you move into the leg and then you look for that releasing feeling, like the comma in a sentence. Now, what can happen there is as you do that, it's like there's a curve. Let's think of a slide in a playground, children's playground. You get the slide, and the slide curves like that. And because it curves like that, what happens is you go up the slide, you go down the slide, and the shape of the slide also takes you forwards. And in the same way, if you can imagine that from the sole of your foot going forwards or backwards, then actually the main thing to be thinking of here isn't I've got to go forwards, but I go down, and down would take you forwards. Raising your toes and your heel. Now, obviously, you're going down here, but you're not going to actually move forwards until your foot is fully on the ground. Well, maybe it's not obvious, actually, but you're not. So the heel goes down, and then we move. Toes go down, and then we move. So it's here. So it's not this, it's this. If I exaggerate, I go down, there. And again, I would emphasize that the down really is that internal feeling. You may get a bit more of your hips sinking, but obviously there's a limit to how much that's going to happen. And then stepping in, and once again, making sure the foot is in position to receive the weight. On the other side. Raising your toes and your heel. This will also, this idea of the downward movement will also help you to avoid pulling up in your shoulders. Think of it like a seesaw. The downward movement here pushes on one end of the seesaw, which raises your toes, and so on. And then stepping in. So again, just as a matter of habit, we develop a way of moving where that sense of releasing that strengthens the root. And I switched from saying down to releasing. Notice actually preludes everything that we do, stepping through. And it's we're thinking about it now, but it just becomes what you do. There's that slight punctuation, that slight feeling of settling before you do anything really. And it relates to going the other direction now. It relates to this other quality of the stillness within the movement as well. These things really are different ways of looking at and approaching the same kind of quality in our movement and our thoughts and so on and so forth. Check it out. Okay, so have your right foot forwards, hands in front of you, and then the figure of eight movement, going back, turning here, and looking for that releasing, that sense of dropping down, again, like the seesaw. And now the other end of the seesaw is pushing your arms up and then forwards and down, turn. And another element here would be that your arms should feel comfortable. If they stop there, that same idea, they've gone to a place where they're not straining, they're not out there somewhere. You see my shoulders coming out of line now. But again, right at the beginning, I said you can extend your range of movement. Don't feel your arms are going far enough. Think down at suddenly my hand, and I'm comfortable there as well. You could tell by the way my fingers disappeared. Same thing here, there. I think, oh, I can go a bit further. Let the whole body soften and get that sense of the barrier dissolving away, or maybe moving backwards, or to just being pushed out rather than dissolving away. And again, we can combine that with the stepping. Notice how my foot pushes out fully onto the floor before I move my weight. Okay. Other foot forwards, so the figure of eight movement. Step in. Then step through whichever direction most useful to you. Remember, you don't have to go in a straight line. I do that so I'm still facing the camera, but I could decide to go off this way, but I'll just disappear from the camera. So use the space that you're in as appropriate. And then when you need to change direction, you could go in a circle. That's better for you. You can even go side to side. You could take a side step. And put in. Again, I'm going to go off camera, so I'll go back the other way. But there's all sorts of ways you can play with this, keeping the same pattern in the arms, but there's still that clarity of movement. and so on and so forth. So there's all sorts of ways you can you can play with that. Really, with that exercise, the decision comes in that moment of punctuation when you're rooting down. This is the crossroads. Which direction you go in? You know, if there's a chair there, you go that way. If the chair's there, you go that way. So go back to your chair. So actually, a lot of those ideas start to give us a sense of choice. We quite often we don't choose our responses to a situation, and in a lot of cases, you know, they're kind of automatic. You put the glass under the tap, you turn the tap on, you turn the tap off before the glass overspills, sort of thing. You don't have to think about it. But other situations, it's quite nice to recognize that there is this space between the sort of whatever's happening, the stimulus, if you like, and what our response is. And we know from the Tai Chi that it takes virtually no time at all once we're used to it. And yet, you know, we meet these crossroads all the time, and usually it's fine, but it's quite nice to feel you can take some kind of ownership on that. So coming back to sitting, and there's always the exercise that really helps us to discover exactly what it is I'm talking about, because we will all experience this slightly differently. Is embrace tiger, return to mountain. You know, it could just be an awareness of the pull of gravity in your body. Somebody may have heard me say this, but when I was learning to play clarinet, it was always a struggle. I had a great teacher, had a lovely time, but it was always a challenge. And I was doing one particular piece, an Italian composer, and I was really struggling with it and things like that. And at the end of it, the teacher said to me, "Yeah, that was really good," he said. "But one question," he said, "why were you standing like that?" And I said, "Well, how was I standing?" And he said, "Well, you sort of went like this." And I hadn't realized it, wasn't conscious, but because there was a lot of pressure there, my response was to take a kind of Tai Chi posture. I'm just glad I didn't attack him, actually. So, but it's so that we in a way we condition our responses to make sure that we have access to that space in situations where we're going to need it. It's not a time thing. So as we discover in Tai Chi. So let your hands drop down and embrace tiger, return to mountain. As your arms come around, releasing in your hips, feel that releasing, allowing your shoulders to drop, bringing your hands in. And then starting all over again, expanding, beginning to release in the hips, feeling the movement down through your back, through the front of your body, wherever's appropriate for you to focus. One more time. And rest. Lovely. Thank you very much. That did go very quickly today. I nearly ran out of time.